And do you want me to open that door? I don't think so. Yeah, I'll just get help. Great. Okay, I think we'll get started shortly. And before I think, Dr. Thurber, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Is my sound okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Awesome. Thank you. And if it's okay with you, Dr. Thurber, I think we're going to go through a quick introduction and then get started, if that sounds good.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome, of course. Okay. Perfect. So, all right. I think we'll get started, everyone. I'll here. But yeah, so I think we'll get started. To thank you to everyone for coming today. I first wanted to introduce ourselves. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming today to the League for Civil Discourse Fall Symposium of Ideas. My name is Ajay Purohit, and I am the head of the League for Civil Discourse. And today with our student panel, I'm very lucky to be joined by my leadership team. I wouldn't be blocking of Reza, Harian, Tui Bullock, and Twin Song, who have been amazing in preparing for this process. And yeah, before we get started, I want to thank Dr. Randolph for all of his help and guidance as our faculty sponsor. I want to thank Ms. Sterling, who's been a huge help and super supportive of this process as well. And a huge thank you to them, as well as a huge thank you to you all for being here. And this Fall Symposium of Ideas reflects the goals of our student group, the League for Civil Discourse, which aims to spark civil and healthy dialogue, debate, discourse on topics that affect our world and our generation today. And so today we will be asking questions we as a group generated, as well as later opening the floor for any additional questions we had. And so, yeah, with that, without further ado, we're going to get into the very exciting part. We've been looking forward to this for such a long time. And today we are incredibly grateful and lucky to have Dr. James Thurber speak with us today. Dr. James Thurber is the founder and former director of the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies at American University in Washington, D.C. He is an expert on American government politics, lobbying reforms and ethics, campaigns and elections, Congress, presidency, federal budget process and deficit, and voting behavior. He is the author of several books and more than 90 articles and chapters on these subjects, including his 4 most recent books, Rivals for Power, President-Congressional Relations, Campaigns and Elections American Style, Congress and Diaspora Politics, The Influence of Ethnic and Foreign Lobbying, and American Gridlock, The Sources, Impact, and Character of Political, Character and Impact of Political Polarization. Dr. Thurber has additionally founded the Biannual Campaign Management Institute, the Public Affairs and Advocacy Institute, and Annual European Public Affairs and Advocacy Institute in Brussels, Belgium. He has also served as a congressional committee staff member and legislative assistant to late Senator Hubert H. Humphrey, Democrat from Minnesota, Representative David Obey, Democrat from Wisconsin, Representative David Dreyer, Republican from California, Representative Lee Hamilton, Democrat from Indiana, and others. He also directed Improving Campaign Conduct, a 7-year research grant sponsored by the Pew Charitable Trust. And Dr. Thurber is regularly quoted by major media outlets, including the Washington Post, New York Times, USA Today, MSNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, among many others. And so today, we, the League for Civil Discourse, could not be more lucky to have the opportunity to speak with one of the world's leading experts on American government and politics. And so please put your hands together for Dr. James Thurber.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. And thank you for being with us here today, Dr. Thurber. It's a great honor to have you speak with us. And I think we just wanted to get started.
AJ, I want to say that my mother would have been very proud of that introduction. It was so long and detailed. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you, Dr.
I'm not used to that. Thank you. It was nice. Thank you. Thank you for having me, AJ, and thank all of you for coming. And thank you for this League of Civil Discourse. It's so important these days for the last decade, actually, but especially these days to have people focused on civil discourse, on also understanding how our government works, and it works by people respecting each other and listening and discussing things. So I'm very impressed with this. That's why I accepted your invitation and your excellent questions that you had on polarization. We can stick to that or to anything else at this historic moment in the United States after this election. Thank you, AJ, for having me.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Thurber. And so, yeah, I think that was the plan, to stick to the questions that we as a group came up with. And also, I guess to start off, I think that we were wondering, maybe just as an introduction, to answer how you got into politics and the study of politics, and kind of what compelled you to start this study, and to gain your expertise on politics and American government and your story throughout all of that.
Well, thank you for asking that. I haven't really thought about that a lot lately. It started in high school. I was student body vice president of my high school. I really enjoyed helping people and bringing coalitions together. And I started reading political science in high school. And then I went on to college. I was an architecture major at the University of Oregon. It's a great school. And then I ran into some political science professors who were great, and I changed my major. And I was going on to law school, but then these professors persuaded me to apply for a PhD program, which I did. I applied at the University of Michigan and about six other places. I got into all of them except Yale. I got into Michigan, but I went to Indiana University um, because they had the professors that I was most interested in, and they gave me more money. I came from sort of a modest background. My father was a small grocer, and it was, struggled. And so I needed scholarships and fellowships. They gave me the best package. It's just like a football player, something. I went to that place. So I became very interested in political science there and focused on a variety of topics. Later, I redistricted the state of Washington, where I was a faculty member out there, and I became intensely interested in polarization that was occurring in 1972 in the state of Washington. And I saw the roots of it when I was doing the redistricting. Then when I applied and was selected to be a congressional fellow for the American Political Science Association, I worked for Senator Humphrey, and I saw that things were changing. He got along very well with Republicans, and it was a very different time then. In fact, then Senator Biden was just elected and he sat with us. I was able to sit with Humphrey and Biden and a few other staff members where he was sort of educating him about the Senate. And what he was educating him about was that people got along with each other. Maybe you disagreed on policy, but you were respectful and you built coalitions around areas that you agreed on and you moved forward rather than destroying the other person. I'm sorry, this is a long answer. But then later, much later, I worked for then Senator.
Please, Lucia Detling, to the front office, please. Thank you.
Do I have to go to the front office? Did I do something wrong? Let me go on and say that then later I worked for a variety of members. Some of them were listed. Senator Obama was one that I worked with on ethics and lobbying reform, procedural reform, and became very focused on the polarization that began to bubble and go forward. So that's on the applied side. So on the research side, I put together a conference and have a book from Cambridge University Press. You mentioned it, on the sources, character, and impact of polarization. And from that, I've done a few things. So I'm sorry, it's a long story. I apologize for that, but that's my journey.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My next question for you is, are we truly more polarized in America now than in recent history?
Well, of course, recent history is not the Civil War, but we were highly polarized there. We so polarized that hundreds of thousands of people died over slavery, over an economic system that was totally unfair to citizens of the United States. But let's come up to recently. I think that what we found over the last 30 years is the building up of polarization, and I've shown that statistically where there are fewer and fewer people in the middle in terms of polarization. Of course, you know what polarization is. It's people that are pulled to the left and the right when they're governing, but also when they are running for election. Like the primary is the real election on most of the seats in the House of Representatives. There were about 22 to 30 seats that were competitive. And in those seats, in order to get nominated, you have to appeal to the extremes, right and left, and there are very few people left in the middle. And the endangered species are moderate to liberal Republicans. They don't really exist much anymore. There are a few of them around out of Michigan elsewhere, but they don't exist. There's nobody in the middle. You should know politically if it's relevant, I'm a moderate in the middle that feels that ideology is important, but it doesn't solve problems. You've got to come together and work together to solve problems, and you do that by relying on votes in either party. Now, the parties have deviated from that significantly in the House, less so in the Senate. There's a bunch of reasons for that. Uh, so I think it's getting worse rather than better. And I think the Republican Party in particular has swung to Trump, who put, in my opinion, fuel on the embers of polarization and made it worse. We'll see what he does when he governs. Maybe he'll come back more to the middle. I don't know. Certainly, the people on the left in the Democratic Party are part of this too, but it's not quite as bad as the far right in the Republican Party. Uh, um, Fully supporting Trump for presidency and bringing more people in the House and the Senate. It is getting slightly worse every year. Um, Good question. These questions that you had are really the basis of a good book, by the way. They're really great questions that comment. Could you introduce yourselves when you ask your questions too? What was your name? The last.
Tui Bullock.
Yeah.
Joey, pleased to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Glad you're involved with this, right?
So, Dr. Thurber, I'm Reza Harry and I'm a sophomore like Tui. I have a question. Do you think that polarization among Americans is inevitable in our future?
That's a great question, and I think that it depends upon events, but it also depends upon leadership. Um, this is deep history, but when I used to work for Humphrey, he would have positions sometimes that were against his constituents, and he'd go back and try to educate his constituents about why he took those positions, and he still got elected. And he got elected by people from both parties, Democrats and Republicans. I don't think we have enough people that are willing to take a chance electorally when they go back to their constituents for the House and the Senate. They swing to the base of their parties, and it makes it harder to come to the middle to govern later on. Now, is it inevitable? Um, I don't think it is. I think the sun rising in the east and setting in the west is inevitable. But uh, but in terms of polarization, frequently when we have a clear external threat to the United States, people come together. And at the beginning of after Putin invaded Ukraine, not in 2014, but the latest invasion, there was a rallying around position from both parties for a while that brought them together on that position. So foreign policy has changed to a certain extent. It used to be when we hit the blue water and there was a threat, the parties would come together and they were not polarized. But they seem to be polarized on support for Ukraine, and we're highly polarized in America. If you look at Israel and Gaza, and and people pushing back on Israel or accused of things that they don't really believe in my opinion, and people who support the Palestinians do not support Hamas. But that polarization made a difference in Michigan, in your state, in my opinion. And it is a polarization that will be around for a while until we get some peace in the Middle East, in my opinion. But is it inevitable? That would mean that human nature is inevitably polarized. I don't believe that. I have faith and hope. Those are not concepts in political science, but I have faith and hope that people will come together, listen to each other, respect each other, and come to some decisions that both sides may not fully agree with, but they'll move ahead and make some progress towards helping solve serious problems in the world and America. What do you think? Is it inevitable in your mind?
Do we want to get a quick raise of hands,
Yeah.
maybe a poll? Who here thinks political polarization is inevitable? Looks like we're an optimistic group. It looks like almost.
And who is unwilling to put their hand up in such a public situation?
Who
Yeah.
thinks political polarization is not inevitable? Interesting. Yeah, it looks like we think it's not inevitable. So
That gives me hope.
yeah.
I'm glad it turned out that way, but it may get worse before it gets better. And I hope it turns soon, though. Good question, by the way.
Hi, my name is Quinn Song. I am a freshman, and I want to ask what our generation can do to overcome divide and polarization in an age of social media and AI.
Well, that was a hard one. They're all hard. So let's leave AI, let's leave AI aside for a second. What can you do? Well, I think that I want to get a little political sciencey here. There's ideological polarization, which is based differences based upon policy positions, okay? And that's democracy. You have that. But there's a thing called affective polarization. That's when individuals have an emotional dislike, anger, or distrust of others, of out groups. I think what you can do is keep your positions on policy as you go through life, but respect others and listen to them, and try to keep your emotions down in terms of disliking people because they have another position. The rhetoric of this campaign at the presidential level and at the congressional level in some cases expressed a lot of affective polarization, anger and dislike. That leads towards more and more polarizations because you don't talk to the people that's an out group. You don't talk to others that you disagree with. So how do you break into that? You break into it through your group, through groups like yours, through later when you're in your communities, being willing to talk to people that have a different view. I come from a rural area in Oregon, by the way, that's born and raised there, and it's Trump territory. And it's always helpful for me when I go back there and talk to people about their worries and about how they've been shamed and left out, about why they couldn't go to college or their kids are not going to college, and how hard it is to get housing for the next generation and how difficult it is to get along economically. Those people, in many cases, as I said, supported Trump. They're angry. They want government to help them, although they don't like government and they don't like elitists in government. They think government are full of elitists. They think I am as a professor. But it's important not to get angry at that and to listen to them. Now, AI, that's a big question. That's for your generation. I've dabbled with that in the sense that I think I'm writing right now. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but I'm writing right now on the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938. It was established to force Nazis to register that were trying to keep the United States out of World War II. And it applies today. A whole bunch of different people have been indicted and convicted in the United States. But what happens is that foreign countries, Russia and China in particular, have taken our language from FARA and they're using it um, as their base law to arrest journalists, to arrest people who are monitoring elections, et cetera. How does that relate to AI? Well, AI is being used in terms of intervening in our electoral system. You have reports of that, how Russia, Iran, China have done this in this cycle, and they've done it in other cycles. That under FARA, that is a felony for those people who've done it. So I'd like to see more rigorous enforcement of using AI in intervening into our system. And then for people here, if they're from other countries, and that's hard to do, but the Department of Justice is trying to do that a little bit. I'd like to have them do it more. Secondly, here in the United States, when people use AI, I think it's reasonable under First Amendment rights to require people to have on their ads on social media or television, this was created by AI. Um, and so we've had a bunch of ads that were obviously AI generated. And if we had a rule that if you didn't do that, it was a felony, maybe we could control that a little bit. But AI is a big question mark for me about how to have more control over it, how to know what's real and what is unreal. Those are a few baby steps, in my opinion. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Thurber. And before I ask this next question, I also just wanted to add that if any of you have questions after this, you can feel free to chime in and raise your hand. And yeah, Billy, do you
I
have
got
a
a
question?
question. I go now.
Of course, yes,
Something
yes.
just happened. President-elect Donald Trump has just announced he's nominating Florida Representative Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, who is an incredibly polarizing figure. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I can't believe it. I've been looking at like everybody else, I'm watching. I didn't catch it. Matt Getz, I'm sorry, I'm biased. He oh, don't get me started.
Yeah.
But Matt Getz won in the last couple of elections by 26 points, 26 to 30 points. So, he's being elected by constituency that supports him, but he has some serious problems in terms of taking a minor girl accused of taking a minor girl across state lines for sexual purposes. I'm sorry to be so explicit here, and in fact, the ethics committee in the House of Representatives was investigating him. McCarthy, former speaker, allowed that to happen and gets pushed to have McCarthy thrown out. And that was one of the reasons he got thrown out. I disagree with that. I think you can get somebody that's closer to Trump that has better experience and more ethical foundation that would be respected. I think most importantly, when you're electing somebody, you should think about their character, whether they're Democrat or Republican, and whether they're appointed. You should think about their character, their moral character, and I would question that if you're asking that. Maybe you support Matt Getz, but that's my reaction. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we've been kind of talking about this for a bit, but I mean, the elephant in the room is that it seems as if we live in two Americas. And this election has shown, and in fact, you in 1991, you wrote a really fascinating article titled "Representation, Accountability, and Efficiency in Divided Party Control of Government." And
Wow, you went way back and read some stuff.
Yeah, no, it was so interesting. And while reading it, I noticed that you write about how you even speak on united government and how united government doesn't always lead to efficiency or support or broad support across the country. And I think it's more relevant now that it appears as if we are approaching a united government on all on all three fronts today, on all three branches today. However, given how divided,
Well, hold it on the House, the Senate, and the presidency.
yeah,
You said three branches, maybe not with the judiciary, but that's
maybe we should add a fourth. Yeah, the judicial branch as well. And I think that it's clear that we do live in such a polarized world. Yet, despite the government appearing to become united now, how does that balance kind of happen among the American populace, and where do you see the future of polarization, at least in the next couple years, in which we have a united government, despite being so divided as Americans?
right. Great question again. Excellent question. It's like questions you would ask in graduate school. So, and you're a freshman. AJ, are you a
I'm a junior, and
I'm a sophomore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we have two
sophomore,
sophomores and
I'm a
one
freshman.
freshman. Yeah.
So I always used to say when I taught undergraduates and then I taught graduate students most of the time, but that they were brighter than my graduate students. And you're showing that now. These are great questions. Well, we're divided on race, we're divided on culture, on questions like pro-life, pro-choice, trans. We're divided on ideological divides. What is the proper size of government and trust in elites? We're divided on geography, rural versus urban, the cowboy states in the South, which is the Republican Party. But if you look at America, it's all the Republican Party except these blue strips around Ann Arbor, and sorry, and down the coast and college towns, the coastal populations. And now we're divided on education. We're seeing that where college grads, where they didn't vote as much as the Democrats thought they would, but overwhelmingly for Democrats. And if you don't have a college degree, you overwhelmingly voted for Republicans. So that's sort of an indirect measure of class. Okay, if you're doing a Marxian theory, class distribution. We're divided on all of these things. I think that in a democracy, that we have, well, in this democracy, we have demographic changes that are going on that may realign the parties, which maybe will reduce a little bit of polarization. For example, Latino men, young Latino men voted at a very high rate compared to usual. It's not a majority, but it made a difference throughout the United States in places like Texas, but also in Pennsylvania and the battleground states, as you know that, as you know. So as those things evolve, maybe this partisan divide among voters, which reflects deeper divisions in Congress and between the parties, will change. Now, to link that into unified party government or divided party government is difficult because we have such variance across the United States in House seats if you're a Democrat and Republican. Yes, they're leaning left and right, but there are also people, sorry to use anecdotes, but Perez, who's in a district in the House of Representatives, a Democrat, who came out against the president, but also came out against many Democratic positions, won in the state of Washington. It's Vancouver up to Olympia. There were districts like that in Michigan. I have not memorized them. I'm sorry, but your senator is new senator is in that position where they're more in the middle and they are willing to fight against their own party and go with the other party when they need to. That's how we break down polarization, by electing people like that. Now, I have a theory that if you have states that are redistricted using commissions, you have more moderation uh, when you get the people running in the general election. It brings people closer together and you have moderation and they're more willing to get along with the other party. I'm not answering your question. It's called a filibuster on my part. I'm sorry. Ask it again if I didn't.
No, no, definitely. That was super interesting. I think that, yeah, I guess the way to go from here, with such a divided populace is to focus on polarization, and to focus on alleviating it and going community by community and addressing it head on, and not just letting it build up, which is
But wait a
definitely.
minute. I think if you go forward and say, I'm trying to reduce polarization, it may not work. But if you go forward and listen
Yeah.
to people about gun control, you listen to, in rural areas in America, you listen to them about, gee, my kids can't afford to go to college. They can't afford a house. It's, and then you come together and you solve problems not based upon ideology. I think that's the way forward. But I think if you run for political office and say, I'm against polarization, it's too abstract. You got to, show it by listening, show it by having civil discourse. Now, that's very hard to do when you've got an audience that's yelling at you over Gaza and pardon me, Israel. It's very hard. It's very hard to do that when you're running for public office, but that's why you're in the public space is to try to bring people together and try to come to a common space.
Definitely.
My last, my next question you kind of touched on in like your last response about like the urban versus rural versus suburban divide and growing up in like a rural town in Oregon and now being in like a big rural city, or not rural, urban city in Washington, D.C. To what extent do you think this like divide between urban, rural, and suburban like impacts political polarization?
It absolutely impacts it. Um, is your high school a union high school that brings people from outside of a city, outside of Ann Arbor?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. We do have a good population in our school outside of Ann Arbor. I think a majority of our students do live in Ann Arbor, but we have a good percentage of students who come from all over the state.
Now, I'll get back to your question and the answer, but because when I was in high school many years ago, our high school drew in people from the country, from some small little communities and farms. And it's embarrassing when I think about it now, but there was a cleavage in the high school between people who came from rural areas, small towns, and rural areas, and the people that came from my town, which wasn't that big, but there was that division. And so the division between rural America and urban America is there politically. 94% of Washington, D.C. voted Democratic, 94%. And last election, and I haven't seen the data yet on rural versus urban, but last election, 94% of rural counties voted for Trump last election. And if you look at America and you look at the plot that's out there from the New York Times of how counties voted, it looks like all of America voted, but it's all, rural areas that voted, not as many people. And so there's very different values in rural areas and uh, urban areas, and distrust sometimes of the two, or shaming people uh, both ways that are in urban areas or rural areas. Suburban areas are different. The Democrats had hoped that they would be more competitive this time and would draw in especially independent, politically independent or moderate Republican women. They didn't. Um, and so the division there after this election was not as stark as it was in the last election because the suburban areas voted for Trump also. Um, but rural areas, again, my home community in Oregon, people don't want you to mess around with their guns. this tragic, awful, vile killings in schools and elsewhere, but they want to be able to go out and hunt. I think in Michigan it's the same way, northern Michigan especially. They want to be able to hunt and have and guns, and they uh, are shamed sometimes by candidates that are on the left for that position. So that division seems to continue, the geographic division, but also the division between the South, the Civil War South, that realigned from Dixiecrats, conservative Democrats, after the 65 Voting Rights Act, when African Americans were allowed to register and vote, they started electing people like John Lewis and others that reflected their views. When that happened, we had a realignment of the South. The realignment was it went from Dixiecrat Democrats to Republicans, and except in urban areas. And now it's changing a little bit more because of uh, new populations coming in, Latino populations, and Latinos are 12 different kinds of Latinos. I don't mean they all vote the same. Cubans are different than Puerto Ricans, than Mexicans, et cetera. But that Latino population is changing the politics in certain areas in the South. And Democrats didn't appeal to them as much as they thought they would. Back to the point, um, a good way to explain what's going on in terms of polarization is geography and realignment of the South. The way I used to put it, except it's expanded, is that the Republican Party base is the South and the cowboy states. Now, what are the cowboy states? Cowboy states are everything but Oregon, Washington, and California, and a very thin strip in Oregon, Washington, California, where there's a lot of population and a lot of GDP. The rest of it, they're Republicans, and I know a lot of those people uh, over the years, and they don't want government on their back, but they want subsidies for some of their crops and things. Yeah, it's not exactly consistent. I don't know if I've answered your question. That's a great question. These are great questions. I think I'll write a book about this, all of this.
That's so interesting that we have to not focus on shaming or shame tactics, but rather having conversations with people. And
Oh, well put. Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
So, Dr. Thurber, I have another question for you. To what extent or where would you draw the line between like a simple political disagreement or like a topic of polarization? Like,
Well, I think that I got into it a little bit earlier when I said we have ideological polarization and we have based upon policy. And so, but some of these policies are so gut-wrenching and important about guns or about a woman's freedom to be able to select their own health care, pro-life, pro-choice, that becomes sometimes rolls over into affective polarization where you have an emotional dislike for people that are willing to have an abortion, no matter what the reason is, and anger. And so the division between ideological polarization and effective polarization is important to remember. And I think it's okay to have differences on policy. Now, that goes down to libraries, it goes down to counties, it goes down to city councils, it goes into the state legislatures. They are highly polarized in many cases also, unless they're dominated by one party. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm sorry. Repeat it if I didn't. Did I answer it?
yes.
So, hi again. I want to ask my next question, which is, we want to know, what advice would you give to young people interested in making like a tangible impact on policy?
Well, I think that you're doing it now with this organization. And, I taught for so many years. I've had so many people who ask that question, and they've gone on to, in political science or sociology or other topics or even hard sciences, and they've gone on and they've interned, they've started working their way up through organizations, or they've mobilized people in terms of an organization to try to change things. And I look around, and a lot of them are in are in political office and in positions of power at the state level, local level, federal level. I've five members of Congress that are former students and probably over 100 staff members on the Hill, Democrats and Republicans that are in positions. But then they go into campaigns, they go into advocacy. I started the Public Affairs and Advocacy Institute lobbying, which I don't think is bad. We need it in a democracy, advocating in an ethical way. And all of a sudden, I look around and boy, they're in positions of power. It takes time, um, and it takes skill in terms of writing and speaking and understanding things. You do not have to be a lawyer. Everybody sort of joked after they left American University and went on to get a law degree somewhere else. And they'd have meetings in New York where I'd go and I was the speaker to help bring in money to the university. You know how those things are. And and so much of them were Wall Street, pardon me, Wall Street lawyers. And they had a roast of me. They said, you told me not to go to law school. And I said, well, get some life experience first, work for a while
Yeah.
and then go back. And they said, oh, yeah, that's right. And I said, well, if it's so bad for you, and I gave you such bad advice, I want you to all commit to giving more money for scholarships for students in university. And so, I embarrassed them a little bit. But, you don't have to go to law school. You probably need to go on and get a master's degree. You don't have to get a PhD unless you want to become a political science professor or something. But get involved and get involved in campaigns. That's where you really learn a lot about what people want, how to speak with them, how to respect them. And so a lot of my students have gone into campaigns, then they've gone back and run for political office, and lose. When you lose, you learn, and then you do it again, and then then you can get elected. I'm impressed that you're doing this. It's very important. I expect you to give back as you go forward because uh, in life, giving is more important than taking, in my opinion. And you're starting that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess we also want to open the floor for questions from the audience now. So if you could introduce yourself and your grade and then ask.
I don't want any gets. I don't want any gets questions.
So my name is Jason. I'm a senior and oh yeah.
Or stand
Yeah.
up.
So yeah, okay, I'm not gonna stand up, I'll just
Yeah.
I'm Jason, I'm a senior, and I think a lot of us have seen a lot of rather concerning rhetoric regarding Trump's presidency, such as like he says he's gonna abolish the Department of Education. There's Project 2025 floating around, a variety of other things, and I think that has led to a lot of widespread fear and panic, especially among the youth of more left-leaning social media platforms such as TikTok and Reddit, and I'm sure among many of us as well. And I guess my question to you is, what do you think is a reasonable, like realistic view for the future of our government in these next 4 years? Under Trump presidency and under the rule of the Republicans in the in the Senate and possibly the House.
Great question. Lots of elements to the question. Just very quickly on getting rid of the Department of Education, it will be very hard for them to do that, even though we have unified party government, because you need to have an act of Congress to do that. And in order to do that, you need a 60 votes to overcome the filibuster in the Senate. There's not 60 votes in the Senate to abolish the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, or to get rid of the Department of Education. That does not mean that they cannot change it through executive order by privatizing loans to young people going to college. Most of the loans now are going through the Department of Education. They probably will do that. But it's a democracy. A whole bunch of people felt that that should be done. And it was pretty clear in the campaign. In terms of 2025, it's a huge document with a lot of things that are, in my opinion, impossible to do. but it does give a few ideas about what needs to be done on immigration. And the people who have been appointed so far, pardon me, nominated so far, they may not get appointed, show that that is going to be a major effort by the Trump administration. He's promised things that are probably impossible. Deporting, well, let's take for example, deporting people from Venezuela. Okay, has anyone here from Venezuela, or do you know anybody from Venezuela now or for many years?
Yeah, people from.
I know people from, yeah.
Yeah. So when you deport somebody, they put them on an airplane. You know, if they're arrested because they're illegals or something, put them on an airplane, they fly them to the country that they come from. They've tried that with Venezuela. Venezuela will not allow them off the airplane. So then what do you do? Do you send them to Colombia? They don't allow it because they've got too many people from Venezuela or Ecuador. My son lives in Ecuador for the last 30 years. They're overwhelmed with Venezuelans. So, yeah, you can arrest some people, and some of them are criminals. I don't think there are very many, but some of them are criminals. But when you deport them, even within the law, and you put them on an airplane, you can't just fly them to any country because when you get to the country, they won't accept them. That's a problem on that particular position. I think that America generally feels that we've got a problem uh, with our immigration policy. Uh, when I worked on the Hill, there was a bipartisan group that wanted to get together, and they came very close with Kennedy, then Ted Kennedy and John McCain and George W. Bush. They came in with one vote of overcoming a filibuster to have a bipartisan bill to have a pathway to citizenship and to help people who were born here or people who married a foreigner, et cetera. There are all kinds of elements. But it didn't pass. And then again this year, another one didn't pass. It was bipartisan. So we are a democracy that has unified party government. Yes, Republicans in the House and the Senate. That doesn't mean that some of these sweeping proposals are going to go through. Senate is like, you've heard it, it's like a saucer where you pour the hot tea into the saucer and cool it. The hot ire of the House of Representatives that represents the last election every two, and they cool it. And so Thune, especially as an institutionalist, he was mentored carefully to support the institutions of the Senate, and they will moderate what comes out of the House. And so they'll moderate what comes out of anything that's extreme in 2000, the 2025 plan from the Heritage Foundation. Notice that they're not, that Trump so far has not really appointed people who are authors of those chapters that used to work for him in some cases, yet he might on policies there. I think the the guardrails for real extreme action will be primarily in the Senate, even though it's more conservative than the Democrats. It'll be in the Senate, and they'll have to use reconciliation for all kinds of bills. Now, reconciliation, sorry, is when you have a money bill, either taxes or spending, and that's primarily what's in the bill, and you pass it under reconciliation. You only need a majority vote, and that's how the infrastructure bill passed, and the chip bill and other things under Biden and lots of others under Trump earlier. They will use reconciliation for a lot of things, but you can't get rid of the Department of Education through reconciliation. That's my expert opinion. And you can't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You can bleed it, you can hurt it, but you can't get rid of it. So the guardrail will be the Senate primarily, the House of Representatives on really controversial things. They'll need to reach over and work with the Democrats, which people on the far right don't like. Of course, they're getting rid of Getz. That's good because he was really wanted to blow the plane. He'll just go over to the Department of Justice and blow that place up. So that won't happen. Sorry, I'm a little biased on that, but you can take it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm Monica, I'm a freshman. I was just wondering, you mentioned the demographic divide between college educated and those without education in political parties. And considering the Democratic Party in the past was considered like the party of the public, the party of the people, I was just wondering how you saw that shift and how that impacts.
Well, it's amazing. If I think it was breaking up a little bit, I think I understand the question. Yeah, the Democratic Party used to appeal to working class people more than it does now, union members. Uh, yes, the union leadership was for the Democrats, but the members, it looks like, didn't fully go along with what the leaders wanted. An example of how that worked with labor and um, agriculture, Senator Hubert Humphrey started with others the Democratic Farm Labor Party in Minnesota. He put together a coalition of farmers and labor people, fully supported the Democrats, and that was a coalition that lasted for a long time in Minnesota. That's changed for the national parties. Uh, how do I see this going forward? I think that the Democrats have to appeal to working class people in America, not only telling them what they've done, which they've done a lot, in my opinion, to help them, but tell them, how can we help you? Go out and listen. Um, don't always go out and tell people what they think the leaders think they need. They need to go out and listen to people and bring people back into the party. That may be difficult. Um, Boy, these are great questions, and these are questions facing America right now generally, and they're great questions. You were a freshman. The last one was a freshman who asked that question? Yes?
Yes.
Give that person an A.
Yeah. Hi, Professor. My name's Billy. I'm a sophomore. You were just touching on it with, obviously, I think it was 2017, we had the skinny repeal attempt on the ACA, only defeated by John McCain at almost midnight, I think it was. So do you think that this...
Yeah, he went like this.
Yeah,
He went like this.
like that. Do you think that something like that could be pushed through now with Thune and a bigger majority, because I believe they have 53 now with the defeat of Bob Casey?
Do I think getting rid of the ACA or so-called Obamacare is possible now? No. I think that they can chip away at it. They can reduce how much money is spent for it, but things like uh, discriminating against people by insurance companies on pre-existing conditions, that's extremely popular. It will continue. There are a lot of things in the act that are popular. It will continue. It's a popular act, but there'll be millions cut off if it becomes too expensive, for example, or if there's not enough support for people based upon their low income.
And yeah, I wanted to make sure, did we have any other questions before we wrap up? Yeah, Ivan.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I'm a senior, and my question relates to one of our leader's previous questions, Quinn. So she asked about AI and how it relates to this topic, and you answered with stating that baby steps consisted of making it a felon or making it illicit to not declare that something was AI generated. My question is, since AI detectors don't currently work with any valid accuracy, how can we ensure that these laws or policies are actually followed?
Great question. And if they seem to not be followed, it's no reason not to have a law that says that if you use AI, you're required to put it on your ads. We have that now for candidates. they have an ad and they say this advertisement is approved by Harris or Trump or whatever. Uh, and yet, we have independent organizations, super PACs on the outside generating things, and probably most of the AI generated stuff this time, besides the foreign, came from super PACs, and that's very hard to do that, but you should require them to do it also. Now, will they break the law? They might. Will foreigners get around detection? Probably, because things evolve so rapidly. But is that a reason not to have the law? I think we still should have a Federal Election Commission law that will force people to think twice before they do it. Now, if you're at I've been in St. Petersburg, Russia a couple times. I've seen the building where all these hackers are, 7-story building, modern building. Those people are not going to be intimidated by a law that says you can't use it. There are 15 of those people in that building that are under indictment under FARA now. If they came into the United States, they could be arrested and indicted. What's my point? Yes, people are going to get around it, especially with AI. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try something in terms of regulation. What is your idea about it? Just let her rip?
Um,
Wild West?
I wish I had a better answer. I don't know enough about the topic to think of a good solution to this problem. The one thing I do know is that many times when things are regulated, but in a way that they can easily be overcome by those with power, essentially everyone uses the illegal thing, but only the ones without power get caught. And that can create a power imbalance in the long term. So
That's astute. That's not being too cynical and negative. That's astute, especially when it comes to tax. The tax code, you hire a lawyer and a CPA that'll help you not pay taxes and they abide by the law. That happens with all kinds of things, like clean air, clean water, toxic waste, but it could happen with this. You're right. But we balance order versus freedom always in a regime.
right.
And I love freedom. I love America because of freedom, but we need to have some order. So we need to at least try to have some regulations in order, or these election campaigns will be just totally full of falsehoods generated by very sophisticated AI, and we've got to try something. It's a baby step to require people to say this has not been generated by AI. I think most people, most of my students, I started the Campaign Management Institute 35 years ago. Most of our students have a very strong core of ethics. They're not going to do that. They're not going to use it if illegally. They'll be in a firm if they want to have the firm survive election cycle, they abide by the law. There's a lot of that, but of course, it's the people on the margins that come in and do wild stuff, and it's control. That's an imperfect answer. It creates cognitive dissonance for you. I'm sorry.
And yeah, I think we have time for one final question before we wrap up. And if anyone wants to ask one final question now that I think we're at time. And yeah.
You talked about you redistricted Oregon, or was it Washington?
State of Washington in 1972.
So
I was junior high at the time. No, I'm kidding.
That connects to, I would say, gerrymandering, and we saw it in Michigan where the committee was created and instantly it flipped a couple of seats blue. So I don't know if you would say that gerrymandering is like a Republican institution built to help the Republican Party, your ideas on that.
Partisan gerrymandering in states where the party has control of the legislature and the governor uh, is both parties, Democrats and Republicans, they want to produce the the most number of seats that they can get in the state legislature and in Congress. So both parties are doing that. Now, if you create a commission that's a citizen commission that is not controlled by the governor or the majority party, that is a way out of it. California's had that. They've had more moderation. Uh, California's still pretty much Democratic, but they've had more moderation. That and the jungle primary, where the top two that win, even if they're from the same party, run against each other. That creates. We have evidence that creates more moderation. But I'm skeptical. I'm still watching that. I think commissions do create more moderation in the general election, and I'm a moderate that way. I think it's better to come to the middle and appeal to people uh, with moderate positions when they're running. Yeah, when I became a reformer after I redistricted the state of Washington because I was asked to do that. I was a faculty member out there by the state legislature that was controlled by the Democratic Party, and they kept wanting me to draw more more districts that were for Democrats. And I said, no, I want more competitive districts. And we had a big argument in the process. So after that experience, I became a reformer. I said, no, we've got to have commissions do it. And I've been pushing that along with the League of Women Voters and all kinds of other reform groups. And so I have a question. Okay, so I go to Ann Arbor for football games because a friend of mine was a vice provost there and a faculty member, and they're great. And a lot of people who go to football games are from fraternities, and so the uh, my Professor X told me uh, after the election. I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "After the election, because there were shockingly many people in Ann Arbor that voted Republican, young people." And he said, "Well," he said, "almost uniformly, the young men in fraternities were very supportive of Trump." Did you see that or hear that?
A little bit. I think given the rise of social media, of right-wing social media and content creators that appeal to younger men especially, I've seen that a lot myself on campus and fraternities, and even among young men around, maybe not so much in Ann Arbor, but in other communities surrounding Ann Arbor that are less blue in nature. Definitely.
Yeah.
Also, I was actually
Go ahead.
I went out to campus a lot with my mom and I campaigned with her trying to get more people to vote and just trying to get out the vote in the last couple of days before the election. And I encountered a lot of young people who were planning to run or planning to vote for Trump, or they were still undecided. It was like the day before the election. So there were a lot of people, unfortunately, in my view, that voted for Trump.
So when people say they're undecided the day before, even a week before an election, they're usually embarrassed to tell people who they're going to vote for because it was a norm in Ann Arbor not that, in my opinion, from listening to people there, faculty members, there's a norm that you couldn't say I'm voting for Trump or you're running around with a MAGA hat unless you were different, and people don't want to be that way. And but they were going to vote for him anyway. In political science, this is a unique election, but we know statistically with a lot of work from Michigan that people have really made up their minds 2 weeks before the election. Different election because she was new and only 90 days and everything. But so when there was a large percentage undecided, I didn't believe it, right? Well, this is very impressive, especially since it's a volunteer organization. This is not a class.
Yeah.
And I think it's a terrific idea. And I've told people here in town that you're doing this. Is this a common thing or is it unique at your high school?
I think this year we started it, and I think a group of people were just hoping to, in such a divided era, and to have conversations and what you've been teaching us today to be able to not shame people or use ad hominem attacks, but to embrace people's differences. I think it's important that we have disagreement in our group when we're having discussions. We all don't think the same and we all don't have the same opinions, but it's important that I think we have civil disagreement with our opinions. And everyone has been amazing with that and supportive of this group. And so we're grateful to everyone here, but we're so grateful to you for coming in and speaking to our group, Dr. Thurber. This has been super informational and helpful.
I want to add one last thing, if you don't mind, and that is what you've just expressed is similar to what my wife Claudia and I endowed, and that is the Thurber Dialogues in Democracy. And so we've had 14 of them. They're all on YouTube with some really prominent thinkers and public officials. You may want to go to it. Thurber Dialogues on Democracy. It's been going on for 3 years. But the whole idea is to bring different viewpoints about our democracy and what's going on. It's not all on polarization. In some cases, we brought in people that were leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, we brought in, and others, they from their position, we brought in some conservatives. So we've been trying to do the same thing. Thank you very much for inviting me. Sorry.
Thank you so much,
so
Dr.
much.
Thurber. And I'll stay in contact with you, but thank you so much for all of your insights today. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for great questions. I see I've scared away most of the audience that's talking.
We're sorry
With a combination of school groups and
No, I understand.
activities and
we tried to set a time where all of us could be here just to see you initially. And so
I commend you for doing this. It's great. Good
thank you
idea.
so much, Dr. Thurber.
thank you.
See
See you
you.
later.
Dr. Thurber.
Thank you.